Homework 4 is a continuation of homework 3, but it adds some new things as well. First starts out kind of the same. How many beats in each problem? So we're going to have to answer that. Some measures are not complete. Okay, well, if it gives us more than one measure, the second measure basically isn't going to be complete, so we have to really think about how many beats rather than just double whatever the meter type is. Finally, writing the counts, so we can get some practice doing that with different divisions of the beat as the basis for counting. So first, how many beats in each problem? Well, this is common time, 4/4, so we know that a beat equals 1 quarter note. So let's just bracket them, 1, 2, this dotted equals 3/8 notes, and then one more. So altogether that's 2 beats there, 1, 1, and 2. Makes sense because every first measure is going to be a whole complete measure. The second measure in these then is incomplete. So we have 4 beats there, here's a beat, and here's only a half beat. Because we have 1 out of the 2 eighth notes that would take to make a whole beat. So we have 4 in the first measure, plus we have this one, 5.5. So ultimately, altogether, we have 5.5 beats. Let's do the counts. We know that if a quarter note equals 1 count, eighth notes are going to be getting the 1 ands. 1 and. That's the smallest thing we have, so we go 1 and 2. This 2 could have 2 and, but we know it completes the entire 2, so we don't need to write the and. It's a whole unit. 1 and 2. And then, right, we had these 3 different eighth notes here, as you recall. So I'm going to just think about them. The first would be 3, next 3 and 4. 3 and 4, and then an and for the last one. It's kind of hard to see here, so I'm going to circle the individual things. 1 and 2, then 3 and 4 and. Okay, next 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Notice we're missing the and of 2, so this is not a complete count. Again, it's this half count here. Let's look at a nice example here. First, let's say how many beats we have. So, again, the first thing, we're in 2/4, so we should have 2 beats a measure, and the first measure will have a complete system there. So, that's 1, that's 1. But this, it's 2/16, which equals 1/8. Okay, and that's only half of a quarter note. Quarter note, which is our main beat, would require 2/8. So we have 1, 1, and over here we have a half. Meaning, how many beats do we have in this entire little set of 2 measures? We have 2 and a half. Let's write in the counts. So we have 1. This next part would be an and, but it's broken to fourths of a beat. And fourths of the beat have to be counted like this: 1 E and a. Since we've already completed the 1 E part, now we have the and a remaining. So we go 1 and a. I could also write it like this: 1 E for the first part. Either way, it implies that we've gotten these first 2 parts already of the beat, and we have the and a last 2 quarter parts remaining. 1 and a. Here, I have to say 2 E because it's the first 2 parts of the beat, 2 E. 2 E, and I could say 2 E and to show the 16th parts that it's made of, but it's fine as it is. 1 and 2E, and then 1E. Circling isn't terribly clear here, so maybe I'll stop that. Let's look at this last one. Oh no, last one, but 3/8. So we're counting eighth notes. Well, 1, 2, 3. How many do we have? 2/16 equals an eighth. Another eighth. Look, it's got all 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6. How do we count them? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and oops. Next measure, sorry. 1, and 2, and 3. And I could say and if I want here too, because it, ultimately could be broken down to 2/16 note values. Let's look at the next part. Have a half note as our count. So half equals 1 count. Then if we had quarter notes, it'd equal 1 and then eighth notes would be 1E and a. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1 and 2 and oops, forgot to actually say how many beats we have. So 4 beats in the first measure, and then 2 full half notes or 2 beats in the next measure, or 6 beats entirely. Okay, this example might look scary because it has a 5 on top, right? But it doesn't really matter. All we really care about is there should be 5 beats ultimately, but we care that we're counting these quarter notes. Quarter note is going to equal 1 count, eighth notes get the 1 and 2 ands, half count parts, and if we divide it up into 16ths, as we have here, then we have to have 4 parts, so like 1, E, and a. Let's go ahead and first bracket the beats. So there's 1 beat, eighth note and eighth rest, there's 2, eighth and 2/16, there's 3, and this last part, 1, 2, 3/8 plus another eighth equals 2 beats there. 1, 1, 1, and 2. So that's all 5 of our notes. This next measure has 2 eighth notes or 1 full quarter beat. So 1 plus 5 is 6 beats. Now let's count it. 1, E, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and. This last 4 and 5 and is all part of this dotted eighth note. Sorry, dotted quarter note rather, because there's 3 parts, 4 and 5. The last little and goes to the eighth note. Okay. So let's go to, oh, and of course the next measure, which only has 1 full beat, 1 and. C, of course, again equals common time. Let's go ahead and count the particular beats in here. 1, 16th rest, followed by 3/16 notes. There's 2 eighths, making a quarter as well, an eighth, and basically another eighth here because 2/16 equal the quarter. And then finally here at the end, this is like 3/16 plus 1/16 for a total of 4/16, which equals to 2 eighths, which equals to 1 quarter or a full beat there. So 1, 1, 1, and 1, or 4 beats for that entire measure. And we only have 1 measure to count, so they gave us all 4. To count, since it's common time and we are counting with quarter notes, then 16th notes, or 1/4 of a quarter note, and hence we need the 4 parts, or the counting of 1 E and a. So we go 1 E and 2 and 3. And this would be like saying 3 E in this case, 3 E, because we have it comprised of 2/16 notes, 3 E, and we're on the 3rd and 4th parts, the third and fourth syllables, essentially, of the quarter counts. So we have 3E, and now we have to arrive at the and. This is, again, 3 parts, 3 quarter parts, so I need to be 4E and, or 3 little parts, 4E and the last one is right, 4E and this dotted eighth. 4/8, okay, so we're counting eighth notes, and 16th notes would be half parts. So 16th notes would be counted 1 and. How many do we have? Here's 2/8, the quarter rest, 3 and 4. So 4 full beats there. The next measure just has 2 32nd notes. Those 3 stripes you see here, 3 beams, 1, 2, 3, so 32nd notes. And that equals to 1/16th note, which is equal to half of an eighth note. Eighth note, of course, equals 2/16. So we only have one of them. Oops. Only have one of them. So we have 1 out of 2, or a half count. So here, 1 count, 1 count, 1 count, sorry, 2 counts. Two counts here, 2, 3, 4, and then we have this half count here. Or 4 and a half counts total. Cool, let's count it. 1, 2 for this quarter rest because it's 2 eighth note values. 16ths, it's not quarters of an eighth note, it's just half of an eighth note. So we need the half counting version. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. Here, it's 32nd notes, which is 4 times smaller than our main eighth note count. And because of that, we need to count the 1E and types, so 1E. 3, 4, we're just counting 3 main things and their quarter notes. Here's 1 quarter note, and here's 2 of them. So we have 3 full counts there. There's 1 count. Because 2/16 equals an eighth. Eighth and eighth is a quarter. 1 more quarter, so 1 and 1. So we have 5 counts completely. Let's go ahead and put in the written counts. 1 and 2, 3. 1 E and 2. I could also go 1 E and if I wanted to show the 16th notes contained in this eighth note. 1 E and is just fine because the is implied by the fact that we next arrive at 2, or we know that we've completed the full 1 count. Okay, now we're rewriting notes and beaming correctly in the given meter, and then of course writing the counts again. So first of all, we just have to beam these things correctly. I'm going to go ahead and put brackets over them to show them. So let's look at this thing. It's C, common time, so I'm just going to write in 4, 4. That means we're going to beam things together by 1 beat at a time, or quarter notes. So that would be beamed together. In this case we have 16th, 1 more 16th, both of these together create an eighth, and then we have an eighth in the middle. So essentially 2 eighths or 1 quarter note here. We can't beam rests in the beginning or end of things, but we can beam over them. Regular notes, non-rests, can be beamed so long as they have a flag. So this 1, 2, 3, 4 all makes a beat, although we can't beam it all together, we can only beam these last 3. At the end here, an eighth followed by 2/16, equivalent of 4/16. Okay, so let's beam that together. Over here I'd go like this, 1, 2, beam them. Then I have here, I'm just going to keep the flags all in the same direction here. and keep the same notes. But essentially you could write the same notes or not, and you'd still have the same beaming conventions to use. Okay, so the next is going to be 16th, 8th, 16th. So I'll beam them using one full beam, and then I'll go ahead and add the 16th note on each of them. Next we have that rest thing, so I'll go 16th rest, followed by 3/16. Just beam it all together, make sure to put that second line on. Finally, 8th and 2/16. Start like that, and then add the 16ths at the end. I'm going to go ahead and put the counts under the rewritten ones I did. What was that again? Oh yeah, common time. Great. So 1 and 2, E and 3, E and 4, and this part could be potentially confusing, so I'll write the 16ths in there. That's where we get the E and in the middle here. 2 E and over at the end, same type of thing. This 8th note could be thought of as 2/16, so I could go 4 E or just 4, but since I've bypassed the E, I have to make sure that the last part has this and okay, it's 2/4. We're going to be basically grouping quarter notes, so I need 4/16 here, and an 8th and 2/16. Great. So 1, 2, 3, and a rest, which we can't beam. So just go like this. Oops, they're 16ths. So let's add the second beam. Then we have an 8th, followed by 2/16. And again, here we have rests, so these rests can't be incorporated into the beaming conventions. How would we count it? We're counting quarter notes, so 1, E, and 2, 2E, you could think 2 if you want, because it has a 2/16 notes, 2, and okay, this one's counting half notes, so it's a bit weirder. 4 8th notes equals one of our half note beats. And we have another half note. And then we have 2/8, which equals a quarter, plus a quarter. And all that, of course, equals to 1/2 note. So let's beam the first 4 together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 8th notes go together, followed by a half note, followed by 2/8 and a quarter. 8th, 8th, quarter. And I can only beam these 8ths together because a quarter has no flag. And if there's no flag like that, then I can't beam them together. So ones with bigger note values look kind of weird sometimes. Let's write in the counts. And 8th notes are actually a quarter of a half note. And because of that, I need to use quarter parts counting. 1, E, and 2, and then 3, E, and. We have common time, or 4, 4. Let's beam these together. We need 4/16. This is actually 4/16 too, because the 8th note with a dot equals to 3/16. Another one, and 8th and 2/16. Okay, so those are beaming requirements. Let's go ahead and do that. First start out by rest, and these 3/16. Then we have a 16th and a dotted eighth. Okay. Then we're going to have 2/8. And 1/8 to 16th. Counting 1 E and 2, 3 and 4 and Okay, now we're going to insert bar lines, and if the final measure is complete, put in the final bar line. Also, we're going to write in the counts. It says if the final measure is complete. Well, it may not be complete, and if it's not complete, then we don't put in the bar line. So, I have to be careful of that contingency. Alright, 3, 4. Well, we need to put in something every 3 quarter notes. So let's bracket them out. There's 1, 2, 3 quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, double check. And so I say, yeah, there's 1. Then 1, 2, that's a 16th rest, and 2/8, and an 1/8, which is 2/16, 2, and 3. Then 1, and what are we counting again? 2, I think we're counting quarter notes. Yeah. So we only have 2 here. So no final bar line. 2 out of 3. Do we write in the counts? Yes. Okay. So let's do that. Counts are 1 E and 2 and 3 E and then 1 and 2 E and 3 and then 1 and 2. Next one, let's put them in brackets. It's 4, 4, so we need to count up to 4 beats in quarter notes before we put in a bar line. So we need 4/16ths in this case. There's 4 of them, or 2/8, 2, 3, 4. There's 1. And then 1, that's 3/16ths plus a 16th, equaling 4/16ths, which equals 2/8 or 1 quarter. Here, 16th, 16th, and 2 more. And usually you can tell because they're all beamed together to form 1 beat, typically. And there's another one. So we have a common time we're counting, right? 4, 4, and we have only 1, 2, 3 beats at the end, which means, of course, that we don't put a final bar line in there, we just leave it as is. Let's do the counts. 1 E and 2 and 3 and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and these middle ones can seem confusing. 3 for the first, then E and because this is an 8th note, which equals 2/16ths. Some more of these ones. 4, 4, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, bar line. 1, 2, 3. Look at that. It gave us all 4. We have a final bar line. Yay. Let's count it. 1 and 2, 3 E and a 4 and 1 and 2 E and a 3 and a 4 These last two we could write like this too. We could write 3 E and then 4 E and since these things are comprised of, in this case, 2/16 and in this case 3/16. But I chose not to count them, but rather to count the bigger division. 3 and 4 5/4, who cares? Is just count 5 notes. And what are they? Quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One, 2. So no final bar line at the end here. It's just common time type counting. You know, it's the same type of thing as always because we have a quarter note in the bottom, so just counting those divisions. 1 and 2 E and 3 E and 4, 5. 1, 2, 3 E and 4 and 5 and I think 5 E and 1 E and 2 and Okay, part 4. What is the top number in the time signature if this is one measure? Writing the counts. Well, maybe it's not one measure, but let's see. If to assume it is, so if that's the case, then what we do is we go quarter notes is what we're measuring down here. And how many do we have? Well, 2/16 and an 8 equals 1. 2 8s equals 1. So 2 4. Writing the counts. 1 E and 2 and next one. We're counting quarters. So 2/16 plus an 1/8 equals 4/16 or a full quarter note. So there's 1 quarter note. 2, 3 of them. So 3, 4. And how do we count it? We're using quarter notes. So since the first parts are 16ths, they're a fourth of a quarter note, and we need to count with the 4-part division. That's 1 E and 2 E and 3 and. Next we're counting with eighths. This is 2 8s, 2 8s, 2 8s again, and equivalent of 2 8s. 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 8s. Crazy. Notice also that these things, right? These things were grouped up in 2 1/8 note beats. You always have to beam things by the beat, meaning it has to be at least 1 beat length to put them together. We don't want fractions of beats. But many times people don't also like to see flags just hanging out by themselves. So because of this, musicians will often, in things like with 8 as a bottom, will often beam 2 beats together if it makes it look visually easier, just to avoid all these flags and things. Okay, so again, you're seeing here 2 1/8 note beats at a time put together, and that's not uncommon. The thing that's uncommon is to have things not sitting together at all because you have fractions of beats. Okay, so let's count this thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8. Next here we're counting 1/8 notes again. How many do we have? 2, 3, 4. So 4, 8. How do we count it? 1 and 2, 3, 4. Let's go to the next page. We have some more of these. How many quarter notes do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. That's an ugly 5, isn't it? So we count 1 and 2 E and 3 and 4 E and 5. Next one, how many quarters do we have? Quarter, 1, 2, 3, quarter, quarter, quarter. 4. 1 and 2 E and 3 and 4. 16ths we're counting, smallish division, so that means there's 2 here, 3, 4, 5. So we have to go, oops, we forgot to put that, didn't we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 8th note is twice as big as our counting unit. So if I was going to circle them, I'd do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, how many 8th notes do we have now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 5 and 5. Look at us doing these 5s. Okay, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So now we're doing count writing, but we're having to deal with ties and dots. So mostly the same. Okay, it starts out as a 4-4. So this is really 3/16 followed by 1/16. So 1 E and or again we could write 1 I'm gonna do this circling thing where I show the length of it. One here, 2. This has equivalent of 3 8th note parts, so it'd be 3 and 4. You should break down things into the smaller parts like this so that you know what to do when you have dots. And this would be the and of 4. So I go 2, 3, and 4, and again if I was circling these things, I'd circle the whole thing because all that is held down the whole time. Since it's tied, it's a pretty long thing. Another way I could write this is 2, 3, 4, and I don't have to write the ands and stuff in there unless there's specifically a subdivision right there, but I do have to write in the counts that occur. So I could either write with this version or this version. 1 E and 2, 3 and 4 and, or 1, 2, 3, 4 and. Either way works. Next one, 1 E and 2 and 3, 4. But since it ties over 1, this whole part would end up being circled because it would be all held down the whole time. 3, 4, and 1 is actually 3 counts all together with the ties there. These are all like small individual things. 2 and 1. So we got the 1 already here. And then we did 2 and 3. You can say 3E and because it has these 3 parts. Or you could just say 3E Why? Because since we put 4 on this next 8th note, it means that we will have had to have gotten through the E and that preceded it. So we read this E right here, and we know that it went E and because otherwise we couldn't put this 4 until those had elapsed already. So we can go 3E, or we can go 3E and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. What is the meter classification? I'm glad it asked. Well, classification refers to 2 things. One, the major type of meter it is, which means is it what's called a simple meter, and that's all we've done, and that's all we're doing. So, hint, it is a simple meter. Or compound meter. You know what, let me hedge my bets a little bit, because it's possible that they might put things like 5s. If it's a 5 or 7, something like this, that's not divisible by 2 or 3, it's called an asymmetrical meter. Okay, so we could say it's asymmetrical, it's none of those other things, but generally what we'd say is simple, and then whatever this top number is tells us how many of the beats. And if it tells us 3, it's called a triple meter, 2 duple, and 4 quadruple. So this one is called simple triple. Well, it asks for the classification, but it doesn't ask us to write in counts or anything, so that's faster and easier. This one here says 4/4. Well, there's 4 beats, so it's simple quadruple. Okay, and this last one, what do we got here? 2/8. Oh no, not last one, but 2. Well, it's duple. Doesn't matter what the unit is, it's just how many of the thingies on top do we have. 2 main counts, so duple. So simple duple. And finalmente llegamos a la última ejemplo en esta tarea, and that is 4/2. So we have 4 main beats. What is the beat unit? Well, we're counting half notes. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those guys, but doesn't matter. The main thing is that we're counting 4 of them, and so it's simple, as always. And then quadruple. And that is it.